The ocean was still hissing behind me when the Slack notification lit up my phone like a siren. I'd just set my piña colada down, sunscreen still drying on my arms, when the words, "Quick request. Can you log in for a few hours?" popped up beneath the little blue HR logo. I stared at it, half laughing. Surely they knew I was on PTO? I'd waited 9 years to take this vacation. 9 years of 6 a.m. meetings, all-nighters with merger decks, and doing 3 people's jobs while being told to lean into the culture. And now, 3 days into 2 precious weeks on the Gulf Coast, they wanted me to hop on for a few hours. I responded calmly, firmly, "Thanks for reaching out. I'm currently on approved PTO. Let's circle back when I return." No exclamation point, no apology, just the boundaries they always told us to have, right up until we tried to use them. An hour later, it came. "Your position is terminated effective immediately. Severance revoked due to non-cooperation." The subject line didn't even say my name, just notification of status change. I reread it twice before letting out a sharp laugh that startled the guy in the beach chair next to me. My position was terminated, severance revoked, for refusing to work during protected PTO? It was so absurd I thought it had to be a phishing attempt. But the domain checked out. So did the signature. I read the last line again. "We wish you the best in your future endeavors." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even sit up. I just sipped my drink and replied, "Thank you for the update." Hey, if you've made it this far, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people listen without subscribing. But if you're into these stories, it really helps the team keep making more. See? What HR forgot, what everyone at Landcroft Holdings forgot, was that I don't play chicken with my livelihood. Not after the last time they pulled a stunt like this during the Belmore acquisition. That time I was caught off guard, blindsided during a reorg and forced to beg for scraps while the board laughed about cleaning house. But I learned. Oh, I learned. And 3 years ago, while everyone was scrambling during another late-night merger blackout, I had a contract revision quietly inserted. Clause 7.3F. I paid a woman named Linda Castor $900 an hour to write it. A human wrecking ball of an employment lawyer who once made a VP cry just by reading someone's severance file aloud. Clause 7.3F was simple. If I was terminated during active, approved PTO, I was entitled not only to full severance, but a hostile termination penalty equal to 5 months' pay and a mandatory breach report to shareholders. I didn't say anything about it when it was added. Legal rubber stamped it in the middle of a 98-page packet, probably thinking they'd never see it again. But I'd never forgotten. And now, sitting there under a blue umbrella with the ocean stretching in front of me, I opened the HR email again, screenshotted it, and smiled. They thought they'd ended something. They didn't realize they'd just triggered it. It happened during what they called the fog quarter, that lovely period during a merger where no one knows who's in charge, and everyone pretends everything's fine, while quietly backing up their personal files. The office smelled like burned coffee and paranoia. I remember sitting across from our interim general counsel, wearing the same blazer I'd been living in for 3 days straight, and saying, "I want a new clause, PTO protection, strong." She blinked. "You already have PTO." "Not enough," I said. "This is going to get ugly. I want something in writing, something binding." She asked me to put it in an email. I didn't. Instead, I made a call to Linda Castor. She was a ghost in the HR world. People knew her name, but nobody said it out loud unless they wanted an HR director to throw up in a meeting. She'd sued Landcroft once before and won. After that, the firm quietly paid her to disappear. But I kept her on retainer, just in case. Linda drafted it overnight. Clause 7.3F. One line. Termination of employment during an active, documented period of approved paid time off will trigger immediate payment of severance in full, plus a penalty equal to 5 months' base compensation. Said termination will also be classified as a hostile executive breach, requiring shareholder disclosure in the next quarterly filing. Legal signed it in a blur, along with 40 other merger stabilization clauses. They were desperate to look organized before the board call. Nobody read the footnotes. Nobody asked why the clause mattered. But I remembered. I remembered every time they accidentally cut someone's final check. Every time they walked a loyal employee out with nothing but a branded pen and a W-2 that looked like a prank. I remembered the panic in Terry's eyes when they fired him the week before his kid's surgery. I remembered how they told June she had abandoned her role after clocking out early once to visit her dying father. Landcroft didn't do compassion. Landcroft did plausible deniability with a smile and a NDA. So I built a landmine. Quietly. Legally. Permanently. And the thing about landmines? You forget they're there until you step on one. No one at corporate remembered Clause 7.3F, not legal, not HR, not even my own director, who probably assumed I'd been handled like everyone else. But I'd been studying this company like a survivalist studying doomsday weather reports. Every loophole, every bluff, every little tactic they used to wash their hands clean while the rest of us bled out trying to make deadlines. When that termination email hit my inbox, it wasn't fear I felt. It wasn't rage. It was confirmation. They forgot, but I hadn't. And now the countdown had begun. I didn't even bother turning off the jazz playlist. The ice in my sangria hadn't finished melting when I opened my email and clicked forward. No explanation, no summary. Just 2 attachments, the termination notice and my full employment contract, marked with Linda's original revision notes. I typed in her email. She still used an encrypted client portal like she was running ops for the CIA, and hit send. 5 minutes later, my phone vibrated. 1 line from Linda. They're going to regret this. I exhaled slowly, letting the words settle into my chest like the first clean breath after a storm. Then I turned my phone face down, leaned back in the lounge chair, and listened to the waves like they were reading the contract aloud themselves. I'd seen Linda in action twice before. Once during the Belmore buyout, when she made a VP admit, under oath, that he'd signed a settlement package he hadn't read. The second time, she forced a company to reclassify 6 former employees as full-time after termination, triggering IRS audits and retroactive penalties so brutal the CFO retired early for spiritual reasons. She wasn't cheap, she wasn't nice, but she didn't lose, ever. By noon, she'd already filed the notice of breach draft and requested records of all internal HR correspondences related to my termination. She flagged the Slack timestamp in their email, noting that it arrived during my protected PTO window, a detail so damning it might as well have been delivered with a bow. While she worked, HR must have still been convinced I'd roll over and beg. They sent another email, this time from no-reply landcroftholdings.com. The subject line read, Your final package and exit resources. I opened it out of morbid curiosity. Inside, a single PDF, a termination acknowledgement form, pre-signed by some HR manager I'd never met, plus a pay stub showing a final deposit for 1 week of unused vacation. No severance, no exit call, no explanation. Just an optional survey link at the bottom titled, "Help Us Improve." The arrogance was almost artful. I read the whole thing once, then twice, sipping my drink as the sun burned just a little redder behind the clouds. I wasn't surprised. This was Landcroft's specialty: deny, delete, delay. They figured if they sent a robotic enough message, I'd disappear like all the others. They had no idea what they'd touched, no idea that the paper trail already led straight to a clause they hadn't read since the merger panic 3 years ago. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to post screenshots on LinkedIn. I had Linda, and I had the receipts, the real kind, the kind that make executives forget how to swallow when read out loud in a boardroom. So I finished the sangria and started counting the hours. The subject line said it all. Notice of imminent litigation trigger. Clause 7.3F. Linda didn't waste words. Her email landed like a courtroom gavel, direct, unemotional, and terrifying if you knew what it meant. She addressed it to Landcroft's in-house counsel, CC'd the external firm they'd used for labor disputes, and neatly copied me. Not because I needed to respond, just so I could watch. She wrote, "Per the contract terms outlined in the attached documentation, and pursuant to Gavin Monroe's termination while under protected PTO status, Clause 7.3F has been triggered. We are preparing a breach action unless otherwise clarified. We are open to resolution discussion. Please coordinate a Zoom call within 48 hours with a representative of the board present, preferably legal counsel with authority to negotiate." No posturing. No hope this finds you well, just pure procedural death. The first response came 6 minutes later, time-stamped 10:42 a.m. EST. Landcroft's junior associate replied with one word: received. By noon, the emails started multiplying. Frantic cross-chatter between legal and HR, chains growing longer by the minute, every name suddenly bolded and typing. Most of it was redacted when forwarded back to me by Linda's paralegal, but the panic bled through in the metadata. Subject lines escalating from clause review to urgent contract escalation to board review required. Someone even pulled up the old employment agreement archive from the 2020 merger folder, last modified by Linda herself. Then, around 2:15 p.m., came the Slack screenshot. Linda sent it to me privately with one line. "Thought you'd enjoy this." The image showed a company Slack channel, internal, HR only. A conversation between 3 mid-level managers and a new HR coordinator named Felice. Felice, "Wait, this clause is real?" Manager 1, "We thought it was removed during 2021 revisions." Manager 2, "It wasn't." Felice, "Can we, IDK, bury it?" Manager 1, "Don't write that here." Then the kicker, Felice accidentally tags the CFO, right there in the chat. A clean blue mention, Aaron Wendell. No undo, no delete. Just silence after that. I don't know what happened to Felice after that message. But within 20 minutes, another email landed in my inbox, this one directly from Landcroft's general counsel. "We'd like to confirm receipt of your attorney's communication and propose a meeting at 9 a.m. Friday morning. Our board's legal representative will be present to ensure all terms are clearly understood." Clearly understood. Cute. I didn't reply. Linda would handle it. My job now was to enjoy the spectacle. For 15 years, I was a name buried in spreadsheets. Someone they saw as dependable, which in Landcroft terms meant disposable. But now, with every email chain, every Slack panic, every executive pulse rising behind boardroom doors, I was no longer just a name. I was a trigger, a clause, a legal liability wrapped in a Hawaiian shirt. And they'd pulled the pin. The Zoom lobby filled with names faster than I expected. First was Marjorie C., the general counsel, camera off, mic muted, probably calculating risk exposure in her head. Then came someone labeled Board Observer Jeff, which was either a junior associate or a human scapegoat. The CEO joined last 30 seconds late, face flushed like he'd just jogged up the stairs or yelled at someone in the hallway. I stayed silent. No camera, just my initials in the corner and my mic off. Linda had it from here. "Good morning," she said smoothly, with the tone of someone who'd already won the argument before the door opened. "Let's begin." She shared her screen. The first slide was simple. My original employment contract, open to page 6, clause 7.3f, circled in yellow like a radioactive warning label. Below it, a stack of highlighted attachments, my PTO approval chain, the time-stamped Slack message, and the termination email that started all this. One by one, she walked through them. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She didn't need to. Then she read it aloud. Termination of employment during an active, documented period of approved paid time off will trigger immediate payment of severance in full, plus a penalty equal to 5 months base compensation. Said termination will also be classified as a hostile executive breach, requiring shareholder disclosure in the next quarterly filing. She paused, let it land, then scrolled. Hostile termination. While on PTO, trigger $800,000 penalty, forfeited severance due, plus breach liability reportable under Item 5.02 of Form 8K. The room stayed silent. No one even fake coughed. Finally, the CEO, Kevin, cleared his throat. We didn't authorize this termination during PTO." Linda didn't blink. "Your HR department executed the termination while Mr. Monroe's approved PTO was still active. The timestamp on the Slack request precedes the termination email by 2 hours, both during the protected window. Authorization is irrelevant. Ownership is not." "But He looked at Marjorie like she might jump in. She didn't. He tried again. "We weren't made aware this clause still existed. It wasn't in the most recent comp summary." Linda smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just the way a surgeon smiles before saying, "This is going to sting." "But you own it," she said. "You ratified his contract post-merger. You maintained the original terms during every performance cycle. You re-acknowledged it during the 2021 executive comp audit." She clicked. Slide change. A PDF from their own HR compliance drive. Landcroft logo in the header. My name, my signature, their e-signature, Kevin's. It was dated less than 2 years ago. He sank slightly in his chair. "The terms," Linda said calmly, "are not hypothetical. They are binding, and they are currently in breach." No one asked what I thought. No one even looked toward my blank video square. That was fine. I wasn't there to argue. I was there to listen. To 15 years of brushed aside warnings finally echoing back across the screen. To the sound of someone else's silence this time. By the end of that same day, the board went into closed session. Cameras off, mics off. Nothing recorded, Nothing confirmed. But if you've been in this game long enough, you don't need a transcript to know when people are panicking. Silence is louder than shouting when it comes from the top floor. I didn't hear a word from them for 48 hours. Not a text, not a bounce-back auto-reply, just dead air. Then Linda sent me an attachment labeled Internal HR Ops, Audit Memo, Leaked Unverified. She didn't explain how she got it. She didn't have to. The memo was addressed to executive stakeholders and marked confidential, immediate action required. It read like a bad thriller novel written by an overworked paralegal at 2 a.m. A rush job to contain a fire already slipping through the walls. Highlights. An internal audit of executive-level contracts is underway following recent legal escalations. Clause 7.3F was identified in not only Mr. Monroe's agreement, but in 5 other contracts executed during the 2020-2021 merger stabilization period. It appears this clause was templated across senior staff onboarding during high turnover months and not individually flagged by legal. And then the bomb. If replicated across all instances, estimated exposure exceeds 4.7 millimeters in potential breach penalties, not including reputational or SEC disclosure risk. They buried that line in paragraph 7. Like maybe if they didn't put it in bold, no one would notice. But someone did. Because 2 hours later, a notice went out company-wide. Effective immediately, HR Director Sharon Kelter will be on administrative leave pending internal review. Please route all contract-related matters to Interim HR Ops, reporting to legal. Sharon. Queen of Policy says no. The same woman who once denied bereavement PTO to an employee who'd lost his brother because the death certificate was delayed. Now sidelined by the very contracts she signed off on without reading the footnotes. I didn't celebrate. I just watched. The dominoes were falling on their own now. One HR misfire, a single Slack message sent during someone's vacation, and the company was suddenly bleeding risk from 5 angles. Linda told me quietly that the audit revealed even more rot beneath the surface. NDA loopholes, compensation inconsistencies, improper severance timelines. It was like someone shook the company and realized the entire structure was made of brittle glass. And me? I was still on the beach. I hadn't filed a single form. I hadn't spoken to the press. I hadn't even changed my LinkedIn status. I just sat back, drink in hand, as a billion-dollar firm tried to duct tape shut a leak they didn't even know existed a week ago. I didn't swing the axe. I just watched where it landed. On the morning the breach notice went public, I was watching pelicans dive bomb the shoreline like they had a personal grudge against the fish population. I'd just finished my second espresso when Linda called. No pleasantries, just her voice, crisp and surgical as ever. "It's filed," she said. "Page 17. She didn't need to say more. I knew what that meant. Landcroft Holdings was publicly traded, which meant that once Linda submitted the formal breach notice, citing Clause 7.3F, and the company's failure to honor it, they were legally required to disclose the dispute in their next SEC filing. Under risk factors, legal proceedings, or executive compensation irregularities, depending on how honest they felt like being. I pulled it up on my phone. Form 10Q, Q3 filing, a bland PDF dressed in corporate legalese. And there it was, page 17, under Contingent Liabilities. In Q3, the company received a formal breach allegation related to executive contractual protections. Specifically, language included in certain legacy agreements, such as Clause 7.3f, which triggers severance entitlements and penalties upon termination during protected leave, may subject the company to material financial exposure and require further disclosure upon resolution. They never mentioned me, not by name, not even by position, but they quoted the clause word for word, every comma, every trigger, every $sign. And the minute that paragraph hit the wire, the real fun began. According to Linda, who had contacts inside the compliance web that ran deeper than most COOs, the CFO hit the roof. Apparently, he'd signed off on the quarterly risk statement just 2 days earlier. And now, here it was, rewritten and refiled with a sentence that made his office light blink nonstop for hours. Investors started calling. 2 portfolio managers requested emergency clarification before end of day. And one anonymous shareholder, likely a retired board member with a grudge and too much time, submitted a request for contract review on every executive still with the company. Later that day, the board called another emergency meeting. This one wasn't on Zoom, it was in person, on site, phones off, badges locked. The kind of meeting where you bring your own lawyer if you're smart, and a resignation letter if you're smarter. Kevin, the CEO, was in the room. Linda's source told her he looked pale, sweat beading at his temples even in the climate-controlled boardroom. When legal began reading the clause aloud for the record, his hand trembled so badly he dropped his coffee. It spilled across the conference table, dripping down the edge, pooling on a stack of quarterly earnings reports. No one moved to clean it up. That's how it ends sometimes. Not with a bang, but with a paper cup falling sideways because the man holding it just realized the house he built was full of forgotten tripwires. And me? Still invisible, still unnamed, just a ghost in a clause, a line item they'd all agreed to and now couldn't unwrite. Poetic justice doesn't shout, it waits, it watches, and then it makes itself legally binding. 2 days after the public filing dropped, they finally broke the silence. The same HR team that once cold-fired me with a bland email and a missing severance line suddenly remembered how to spell my name. Subject line: Severance reassessment. Proposal to discuss. The body was fluffier than a corporate holiday card. We'd like to revisit the terms of your separation, it began. In light of recent misunderstandings, we're open to reinstating your original severance offer, plus a goodwill bonus as a gesture of continued respect and appreciation for your years of service. I laughed out loud, actually laughed. On a park bench in Clearwater, birds scattering from the noise. Respect? They'd tried to erase me with a macro template, and now they wanted to gesture their way out of a 7-figure mistake. I didn't respond. I forwarded it to Linda. Her reply was swift, polite, and laced with enough legal voltage to fry a circuit board. Please be advised, Mr. Monroe's severance was never contingent, nor negotiable. The triggering event has already occurred. Payment is not optional. Kindly refer to Exhibit B of the original employment agreement for the deadline schedule and late fee structure. We suggest processing the owed amount promptly to avoid compounding penalties. She didn't even copy me, just BCC'd me on the send, like a secret gift. They tried once more, this time through an outside PR consultant, a man with an overly friendly voice who left me a voicemail saying he wanted to clear the air and see if we could land in a good place. Buddy, I already landed. It's just not where you think. Because while they were chasing damage control, I'd been working on something else. 3 weeks prior, right after that first HR ping interrupted my vacation, I made a quiet inquiry into an operations consultancy called LeverPath, a rival firm, much smaller, leaner, but wickedly efficient, and quietly stealing Landcroft's smaller contracts one by one. I knew their model. I knew their bottlenecks. I also knew what they didn't have: executive infrastructure, policy design, scalable workflows. So I offered that, quietly, off the books at first, then officially. I used part of my settlement, money they'd tried so hard to keep from me, to buy into their partner pool. It wasn't flashy. No corner office, no press release, just equity, influence, and a desk where nobody forgot what I was worth. By the time Landcroft's third friendly outreach landed in my inbox, I was already onboarding my first contract through LeverPath, a regional distribution company that had terminated their Landcroft deal 6 months early due to inconsistent delivery frameworks. I didn't need an apology. I didn't want one. Apologies are for misunderstandings. This had been intentional. They tried to delete me with one email, but they forgot who wrote the clause. And now I'd rewritten the ending myself. Slide 17 hit like a piano dropped in a library. The Q3 investor call was supposed to be routine. 30 minutes of polished slides, manufactured optimism, and tightly scripted forecasts. But when the presentation flipped to the new Legal and Compliance Risks section, nobody blinked. Not at first. Until that single, unassuming line appeared under a bullet point marked Personnel Contingencies. Unrealized executive liabilities stemming from non-compliant terminations. There it was. Clean, vague, deadly. No names, no dollar amounts, just the legal equivalent of a landmine map buried in investor disclosures. A few analysts tried to ask follow-up questions. The CFO gave pre-cleared responses. The GC nodded stiffly, but the CEO, Kevin, didn't speak, not once. Not when the financial forecast turned murky. Not when someone asked about future headcount reductions. Not even when the moderator handed him the closing remarks. He just sat there, motionless, pale. One hand on a branded paper coffee cup he never lifted. Because everyone in that room, whether they understood the specifics or not, could feel it. Something had gone very, very wrong. That night, I sat in my new office, no glass walls, no assistant knocking every 10 minutes. Just me, a second-hand desk, a silent inbox, and a warm bourbon sweating into a chipped tumbler. The space wasn't much, small, tucked behind a supply closet in LeverPath's satellite hub, but it was mine. Every square inch paid for, earned, and owed to no one. I opened my laptop, pulled up the final thread. The full email chain, from the Slack ping on day 3 of my PTO to the final friendly outreach that tried to put a Band-Aid over a claws-shaped bullet wound. I reread each line one last time. The clipped corporate tone, the missing courtesy, the way they assumed silence meant surrender. Then I hit delete. Not archive, not sort, not save for the memoir. Just gone. Because I didn't need the receipts anymore. They'd already been read by lawyers, by shareholders, by an entire boardroom full of men who once called me part of the furniture. Now I was the line item they couldn't scrub off a balance sheet. And as I leaned back in my creaky chair, bourbon in hand, eyes on the quiet hum of a screen that no longer buzzed with emergencies, I smiled. They revoked my severance. I just collected the interest.